Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. It's Friday. That means it's time for the Rex and the Robbie Show. And we've been doing this whole Halloween kind of theme thing throughout October, not just on Horror Fest, but even here on the Rex and Robbie Show. Today, we're going to cap it all off here with a discussion about our favorite Stephen King adaptations, like movies and stuff like that. Things written by Stephen King and things based on Stephen King works. And you can't have a Rex and Robbie show without Rex. Let's bring him in. What's up, Rex? Station.
What's up? Good choice, man. We were just talking about before we went on the show, and you told me something I didn't know. So we'll have to bring that up, man. I just looked it up, too. That's really interesting. I did not know that.
I wanted to make sure that I was right? That, is it Richard Bachman?
It is. You got that exactly right. Richard Bachman.
Yeah, there's some film.
He even had a... And so to bring everybody up to speed, so I was totally unaware of this, and I really love Stephen King. He had a anonymous pen name, and it was Richard Bachman, and he went so far as to have a fake bio, a fake picture of some other dude, okay, as the author and stuff. And I guess it came out, apparently, according to the article I read, because his writing style was so unique that it was like a few years before people started figuring it out. This is Stephen King. Who is this Richard Bachman dude? So I did not know that.
Well, I'm glad I got to let you know that. And because, we were talking about it beforehand, and Running Man was a Richard Bachman book that I love that movie. Arnold
totally would have made my list. Totally. I love that movie. Very well cast, I thought, with the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing. I love the tongue-in-cheek, the kind of cynical kind of, cadre cola, the whole 9 yards. And to a scary extent, a lot of that has come true. I mean, if you think about it, and there's just so many kind of satirical points that he's making in that movie. And, and of course, Arnold, playing a role at the height of his career. That was really, and the game show host, what's his name?
Oh my goodness.
Dude, because he was an actual game show host. And I thought he did Richard, wasn't it Richard something or another?
I'm looking it up. Richard Dawson.
Yeah.
Richard Dawson from Family Feud, man.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah. But he was perfect for the role because he really was a game show host, right?
I haven't seen that movie in so long. I forgot that he was in there.
I kind of want to see it too.
I have solidified PCP movie night for January, February, and March of 2023, and I'm thinking of what to do for April. I think we're doing Running Man. I haven't seen that movie in so long. Like, I gotta watch that.
You got to, man. So in the house, Marcus, what's up, buddy? Sheldon, hey, what's going on, Marcus? Let's see.
Station everybody.
Pew Pedro, pew pew. What's going on, man? And that Neric. Did I pronounce that right? I have no idea.
That one, Eric.
That one, Eric. Oh, okay.
Yeah, when you use spaces in your names, it gets hard sometimes. I'm
the guy that tries to read those vanity license plate and gets through an accent because I can't figure it out. And I missed the light.
We appreciate everybody being here, and we really want everybody to join in the conversation. Marcus, what's up, buddy? So
best line in the movie, Marcus. Best line in the movie. I absolutely love that movie. That was awesome.
We got to go Running Man in 2023 April.
Absolutely.
I'm writing that down right now, and I'm going to go look and see if it's available on Blu-ray. Surely, like Arrow or somebody's got it out there, right? So,
it's got to be, dude. It's got to be. But it's a lot of that. What that movie predicted has come true. Manipulating the video to be broadcast, and everybody thinks, you murder, and just I have to say it was probably a little bit prophetic by Stephen King.
It's crazy. Some of these science fiction films, how prophetic they do become. We're actually on Sunday night going to be talking about David Cronenberg's Videodrome, which I rewatched the other night. And that movie in 1983 is describing where we are today, right? And I cannot wait for that conversation. It's going to be good. But you're a big book reader. You love novels. Stephen King's one of your favorite writers, I guess?
Yes, absolutely. And one that as I said, before the age of Kindle, you had to like kind of go to a bookstore, and I really enjoyed that experience. So I do miss that. But I also realized the limitations of it, obviously, because you didn't have the kind of range that you have with Kindle now. You don't have free books that you can just try. You don't have samples. So, and bookstores, they, you know, a limited physical size of a bookstore, they can only stack so much stuff in any one store. So, you know, you had friends, they, oh yeah, Stephen King, you got to read him, he's awesome, and blah blah blah. So that plus the movies were coming out approximately the same time. So I would pick up a lot of his books. So it's something that I have to be honest, I have not read anything recent, and I have not really seen movies inspired by him or based on his books in a really long time, for a lot of different reasons. Not because, you know, I don't love Stephen King anymore, but, you know, just call it what you will. But it's feedback. Why is there constantly feedback? I got to figure out what's going on with that. But it's really, he has been such a prolific writer for so long. And clearly, you know, after finding out about Running Man and other things like that, the man has a tremendous amount of range. And I don't blame him for you know, trying to be, you know, have an anonymous pen name to try and get, because at that point in time, I guess when he did it, he was at the height of his career as well. And everything Stephen King was associated with horror or something of that effect. Yeah. So under his real name, would that book have sold? I don't know. You know,
yeah, and that's an interesting thing too, because obviously we're in the midst of Horror Fest, right? We're in the midst of it. Stephen King is known as a horror writer, but some of these movies we talk about tonight may not necessarily be horror, right? That is correct. And I think that is the reason why he did that. So he wanted to see if he could do something different and not be pigeonholed in, like have an opportunity, like a platform to do something else, to tell other stories and things like that. But like you said, everybody caught on, and eventually they started reprinting those books with the Stephen King name on them, right? So, well, and I think even now they go wants to sell more books. I think even now, especially since it's all out, they say like by Stephen King under the name Richard Bachman or something like that. Yeah. Michael Crichton did the same thing with some of his early like crime fiction novels that he would write. So, which I've never checked out any of those. So I really, really need to. All right. So let's get into this, because right now I got 12 movies that I put down just because I know there's going to be some crossover, I'm sure. But I got 8. You got 8. Okay. So we want to hear you in the chat. Stephen King adaptations and Stephen King movies. He directed Maximum Overdrive. Don't remember that. That's not on my list. I'm just going to let you all know that it's not on my list. I don't really like that one. Rex, what do you want to kick it off with?
Well, you know what? Let's just get it right out of the way, because we know it's going to be on both our lists. We know it's on everybody's list. We've mentioned it before. It's made other lists.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, let's just get that one right out of the way, because we all know it's going to be on everybody's list. We've talked about it enough. For me, I had a new love, you know, the Stanley Hotel story, that, you know, the whole thing in Colorado, the genesis behind it. It was I don't know, was it? I don't want to say it was the first movie, but it was certainly, let's look at it as that early kind of early Stephen King generation work, when he was starting to make a name for himself. You know, his books were popular. People were adapting them into screenplays. So I guess my first 3 are kind of like that, and they are, of course, horror based. But I would like to look at that as the first generation of Stephen King work, if you will.
Yeah, I do believe the first one adapted was his first novel, Carrie, by Brian De Palma. Yes. And because of
my second one on the list.
Right. And it was Carrie's success that started this whole thing, right? Like that movie, when it hit, it was a big deal for horror fans, for movie fans in general. And then everything he did became a movie, like instantaneously. Like sometimes the movies were being worked on before the book was actually published. That actually is the case with like Christine, which is one I'm sure we'll bring up. So you got The Shining, obviously. We talked a lot about that last week. Carrie, you said, was next on your list.
Carrie was next on my list, and then Christine was part of that. So I only picked 3 because I knew that this list was going to be too long. So those 3 I look at as first generation Stephen King work. He had just kind of broken through that ceiling, if you will, as a writer. So he you know, I look at that as that initial, what got him kind of launched, if you will. All right. And then, of course, there were tons of movies. And, you know, Silver Bullet, also on my list, Jay. It's that was a tremendous movie. But that I almost kind of look at as well, if you want to use MCU terms, it's phase 2. Okay. Silver Bullet was kind of a phase 2 movie because he was already established. And Chamorro, what's up, man? And as I said, I went to go watch that movie, not because it was necessarily a werewolf movie, but because it was a Stephen King movie. So now all of a sudden that second generation, you would go because you're not even sure what the storyline is. You just see, oh, Stephen King. Well, I'm going to go watch that. So Silver Bullet's on my list a lot.
It's crazy to me how many people, because this is me, for instance, I grew up, I would call myself Stephen King fan throughout my life. The only Stephen King book I read in my first 25 years of life was Salem's Lot. That was the only one I ever actually read. I tried to read it when I was 10 years old when that miniseries came out, and there was just no way 10-year-old Robbie was going to make it through it. You know what I'm saying? So it's still something I plan to do. But since then, I've read all of The Dark Tower, and I've read Firestarter. I've read Carrie. I read Carrie for the first time just 2 months ago. Was blown away by how powerfully paced this first novel by Stephen King was, right?
Right.
And so I plan on going on a journey. I've picked up The Shining. I've picked up Dead Zone. I've picked up The Stand, books I haven't read, but I'm going to reread through his bibliography in chronological order is a plan, spread throughout just my normal reading, right? So just a little bit at a time. We actually talked about Carrie on the book report. Carrie's an amazing movie. Brian De Palma did a great job with that one. All of the performances in that movie highlighted by, oh my goodness, why am I blanking? What's her name? Plays Carrie. Why can I not think of her name? You know who I'm talking about, Rex. Are you still there, Rex? Is Rex frozen, y'all? I've been talking to myself. Rex is frozen. Y'all help me out. Who's the main star in Carrie? Sissy Spacek. That's right. Well, we've lost Rex. Thank you all. I appreciate that. We've lost Rex. It looked like they were having some internet issues over there. So I'll just continue to ramble, and we'll see what happens. Are you there? You want to back out, maybe just restart and come back in? I can keep us going. All right. You never know what's going to happen on live YouTube. You never know. And there you go. So we talked about The Shining. We talked about that a lot last week. I've never read the book. Stephen King doesn't like the book or doesn't like the movie because it goes too far away from the book, he says. And then Mick Garris did a version of it that Stephen King has approved of. But I love The Shining. Carrie, an amazing movie. Sissy Spacek's great. Her mom is played by the lady in Twin Peaks. I don't remember her name either, but absolutely fantastic. Yeah, he's frozen like Jack in The Shining. I love it. Love it. And he mentioned Christine. Christine is such a good movie. We covered it on Dylan's Horror Show just a few months ago. And rewatching that movie, it's a John Carpenter movie. And I mentioned that some of these films were made and adapted before the books were even actually published, or the production had started before the production had even started. And Christine is one of those where this producer, right up, just was straight up I'll buy your next 2 books, right? And so the manuscripts were delivered, and then he got Carpenter to do Christine. Firestarter was supposed to be the other one, and John Carpenter did not do that, but he did do Christine. While we're waiting on Rex to come back from being frozen like Jack in The Shining, but when he comes back, it's all about to blow up like Jack in The Shining. I hope so. I hope we get to see Rex again today, because he was really pumped to do this. He was really pumped. So the next one then that I'll bring up before he gets back is The Mist. Y'all, I love The Mist. So that's a Frank Darabont film, and Frank Darabont knows how to adapt Stephen King works into cinema, right? Because he's done it 3 times with absolute perfection. The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, and The Mist. And what I love about Shawshank Redemption is just a masterful film. That may be one of the absolute best adaptations of maintaining the spirit of the original story, I guess. I don't know. I've never read it. I think it's based on a short story or something. But just doing a really great job of making a really solid movie that I absolutely love. The Green Mile, which was, I think, serialized through some chapters and then put together as a novel. I like that movie too. But The Mist, that's Robbie territory. That's horror. That's something that I'm going to watch over and over and over again. And what I love about The Mist is how genuine all the performances are. And it throws back to like 1950s era terror. And another great thing is on the special edition Blu-ray, you can watch it in a black and white edition, which really cements that 50s horror kind of vibe and feel to it. I think it's great. The ending is one of the most biggest gut punches I've ever had watching a movie, and it's different than the ending of the short story. And Stephen King even said, I think that ending is better than my ending. Of course, Stephen King doesn't think he writes good endings, and other people think that as well. Speaking of endings, what's up, Rex? You back?
I don't know what happened there, guys. My apologies. Something, either this old computer isn't working so good, or we had internet interruption. So,
hey, it happens to the best of us. Basically, since you were gone, I just recapped The Shining and Carrie and Christine, and then I brought up The Mist. Have you seen that one?
Yes, that's another good one.
And along with The Mist, I brought up the idea that Frank Darabont directed that, as well as The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption. So this dude knows how to adapt Stephen King works into cinema.
Well, I got to tell you that so the next phase, which is interesting, the next phase for me, obviously you had that first generation, and Cujo was one of them. Firestarter, Carrie, Christine, The Shining, all that. Then you got to this era where he was making movies, or he was writing books, or the movies were not horror, and like The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me, which was a personal favorite of mine. Yeah. So all of a sudden, you kind of realize that he could move beyond that horror genre, which obviously was where he came from, but obviously his talent could expand to other things. And then he had the power at that point, I think, that he could get those movies made. I think that was significant. It may not have worked earlier on in his career. He needed to establish himself. He had that kind of clout at that point in time, and then he could make movies like Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, that kind of thing.
Yeah, able to do things outside of horror. And that was a really cool era, right there. Like Shawshank Redemption, dude, that movie's absolutely fantastic. It's so good. Morgan Freeman, Tim Robbins, everybody in that film. And it's, you were talking about the MCU earlier. Like Stephen King's got his own multiverse, right? He's got Castle Rock, he's got Derry, he's got the whole Dark Tower that threads basically all of his works together into one, including Stephen King himself, which is a trip. Hell yeah. Do you got another movie you want to highlight, bro?
I think you've pretty much killed all of my choices right off in the top there.
Oh man.
But it's not unusual. The only one that I didn't see really listed as popular, which is kind of interesting, was The Dead Zone, which I got to admit, as a movie, it wasn't great, but I had read the book first, and the detail in the book didn't quite match up with the movie. But again, it's kind of like, I felt like the book was kind of like Dune. It was a lot of stuff to pack into 1 2-hour movie, and I think that's where they kind of ran into trouble. They had to shorten certain scenes, so on and so forth. The beginning, the recovery period, and then discovering he had these powers. It was a lot to pack in. But in that era, you couldn't make a part 1 and part 2. Nobody was putting up with that. Movies tended to be singular kind of stories. And then if it was popular enough, we'd make part 2. But part 2 seemed to always be a pale comparison to the original. That seemed to be, we always felt like when part 2 came out, the studio's going for the money grab. They know we're going to watch it. We know we're going to hate it, but we're going to go watch it anyway because, right? So, but now obviously things have changed. You can do it this way. You can do a part 1 and part 2, and people will still come. I think Lord of the Rings really kind of broke that out for us.
Yeah, but you can't take it for granted, because something that I'll eventually bring up is a movie that was strong in the first part and then not so strong in the second part, right? But with The Dead Zone, I do think it's one of the weaker Cronenberg films, but I still like it, right? I love Christopher Walken in the film. I love Martin Sheen in the film,
Yes.
right? He's really good. And Martin Sheen's also in Firestarter as a
Yes, that's
guy
right.
that runs the agency, right? And Firestarter is a movie that I don't think is good, but I do like it. And I think it's great compared to the new one, because the new one sucked. I mean, really, really was bad. Here's one I want to bring up that I think is going to be on a lot of people's list. I'm surprised I haven't heard about this one yet. Misery. Misery is such a fantastic movie, man. It's so good and it works. And then that scene where she like, what is it,
I can't, dude. I can't. Oh, when she breaks his ankle, it's like,
you see that foot go boom.
Like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God. James Caan was great in it. What was her name?
Kathy Bates.
What's that? Kathy Bates. Yeah, that launched her career, really.
Yeah.
I thought, I mean, she was kind of a role actor, playing bit roles, and she gets this starring role, and it made her. I mean, her career kind of took off after that, which I'm very happy for. She was excellent in that movie.
She was so good. And yes, R.I.P. to James Caan. He was one of the greatest actors of his generation. Yes, I love James Caan, and I'm very excited to in November we're doing all 3 Godfather films week to week. So Godfather 1, 2, and then 3. And every time Sonny gets got in Godfather, it like breaks my heart. I just wish that there's always a moment where I'm like, maybe a Mandela effect thing has happened. I've switched universes and Sonny lives. I don't know why, but
I think really, in Godfather, the best scene for James Caan was when he goes after the brother-in-law, the sister's husband, and he's just kicking the living crap out of him in the middle of the street.
Apparently, a lot of that was improv by him, like when he grabs like a stick or something and throws it at him.
Yeah, that was just that was fantastic. And obviously, one of my favorite roles for him obviously was Rollerball. I thought he played it. That was an excellent movie. I mean, the remake was paled in comparison. Oh my gosh, it was awful.
Was LL Cool J in that remake or something, man? Like that
was horrible. That was just absolutely.
He's also really great. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie by Christopher McQuarrie called Way of the Gun, but he's in there with Benicio del Toro and Ryan Phillippe and Taye Diggs and Nicky
I've not seen that one.
That movie's awesome. He's great in that film.
I remember he early in his career he made a Western with John Wayne. I can't remember what the name of the movie was, but he was the guy that had really bad eyesight, so they gave him rather than a revolver, they gave him like a shotgun or something. So they figured, hey, listen, just pull the trigger. You can't miss it. Short distance, you're gonna spray the room anyway. And I thought he did an excellent job. He was clearly there was another one that I really, really loved. The sci-fi movie, where the aliens land and assimilate into society. You know what I'm talking about.
Aliens land, assimilate into society.
Yeah.
And he's great. Yeah, he's great in Brian's song. We talked about that like a few weeks ago, actually, didn't we?
Oh yeah, Brian's song, obviously. Yeah, we did. That was the best football movies. Jay Burns, I believe it was El Dorado, but come on, man, really, you don't remember?
Well, you're being rather vague, man. Oh, Alien.
I know. For whatever reason, I can't remember the name, but it was.
You talking about Alienation?
Yes, Alienation. Thank you.
Okay.
No, not V. Sheldon. Alienation. That was one of my favorites for him as well. He played that old, scruffy, bigoted cop and everything, and it was well done. I thought he did a tremendous job. It was exciting, great story.
Yeah.
So
I also love him in he plays himself in Mel Brooks' Silent movie, and he's great in that performance too.
Yes.
But this is a Stephen King show, not a James Caan show. No, I feel like now we got to do a
James Caan next week.
Or maybe. Another one to throw out, Children of the Corn, man.
Yes.
Holy cow. Creepy kids. Kids are creepy. I don't like kids, Rex. Kids creep me out. And Children of the Corn is actually a really great performance by people like Linda Hamilton. But everybody remembers the whole Malachi and all that kind of stuff, bro. Like, that movie is good. They made so many sequels. It was one of those things where Miramax got the rights, and it was like they got Children of the Corn and they got Hellraiser, and they had to just keep making these movies to keep the rights until they could eventually, hopefully they wanted to relaunch them or do a big something with it. So they just had to keep making these movies. So they would just find scripts that were written on spec. They would take them. They'd be like, they'd hire another writer, be like, turn this into a Hellraiser movie, turn this into a Children of the Corn movie, and they just put out so many. But that first movie still has an impact for me, man.
It does. I agree with that. But let me see. We've gone through everything on my list, that's for sure. Let me see here.
There's some good ones still to come. I still got a few I can bring up.
Well, go ahead. You go, because we've exhausted my list.
How about this one? Here's one that's not based on a book by Stephen King, but he wrote the screenplay, Creepshow.
Show. I saw that. I was going to put that on my list, but that was phenomenal. I'll never forget that one scene where the guy's buried in the sand. That really freaked me out, man.
Oh, yes, with Ted Danson and Leslie Nielsen in that bit, man. I love that's probably one of my favorite stories in the whole thing, but I love all of it. Like the great effects by Tom Savini. George Romero directed that film. Stephen King, him and George had a really good relationship. They worked together a lot. They also worked on Tales from the Dark Side, which is kind of in the vein and a spiritual successor to Creepshow, and also just a great homage to EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear, and absolutely fantastic stuff right there.
I remember going into the movie theaters to see that movie and not really sure what to expect. And it turned out to be, and I didn't realize it'd be like short stories, or little stories, one after the other. But I thought it was phenomenal. It kind of had a Twilight Zone kind of feel to it.
Yes, I love Creepshow so much. Have you seen the most recent It films?
I have not.
It Chapter 1 is probably one of the best adaptations of Stephen King horror into modern cinema. Like It Chapter 1 is amazing. Chapter 2, not so much. Now, I've never read the book, but we just covered this last week on Dylan's Horror Show. It Chapter 1 and 2. And number 1 is so good, but 3 is just so long. And 1 focuses all on the kids stuff, and 2 focuses mostly on the adult stuff. Now, I remember in the original series now, which was reminded to me last week, but the book and that original miniseries with Tim Curry, they interlace the adult story. Like they all come back to Derry, and then they tell the story through flashbacks or whatnot. So in the It Chapter 1, it's all just the kid stuff, and that is such a good movie. It's like 2 hours, 10 minutes. It is worth it. It is genuinely scary. Bill Skarsgård's performance as Pennywise is amazing. However, Chapter 2, I think sucks. I really don't like Chapter 2. I think you could just watch Chapter 1 and be satisfied, and you're like, you know what? Don't need to know what happens 27 years later. But that's a good one. Did you remember the one from the 90s, though? I'm sure.
Yes, the one from the 90s, I remember. It just felt like that there was a period of time where anything the guy wrote just scared the crap out of you.
Yes.
It was a phenomenal kind of run for him. And I got to go back to that point. I just feel like Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me would not have been made if he didn't have that pull at that point. Which I think is interesting, because those are probably 3 of the, forget about best Stephen King movies. They're probably 3 of the best movies ever.
These movies are great.
Yeah. Stand By Me was phenomenal. I can't even, the entire movie, the way the story was told, Richard Dreyfuss is, telling from his perspective as a kid. That was just an amazing, and the acting was obviously,
Kiefer Sutherland as the bully, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Launched so many. Jerry O'Connell's in that film.
Yep, that's right.
Rivers Phoenix, right?
Phoenix, obviously, God rest his soul.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was phenomenal. Go ahead.
We were talking about Creepshow, his collaboration with George Romero. They had another collaboration together. George Romero directed the movie adapted of The Dark Half. I don't know if you've ever seen The Dark Half.
I have not.
So they did that in the 90s, and it is a undersung Romero film and Stephen King adaptation. I thought they did it amazing. So it's about a writer who's got it's like a Jekyll and Hyde type thing. He's got this dark personality inside of him that comes out in certain times, and it's actually a really well put together movie. I am been trying to get Dylan to do it on Dylan's Horror Show for a long time, but it's one that's hard to find streaming or even in physical media. But I love The Dark Half. That one's really good. Did you ever watch Apt Pupil from the 90s?
No.
Apt Pupil is a Bryan Singer film starring Ian McKellen, and he's like an old gentleman who was a Nazi, right? But he's now living in America under a fake name, and he's just kind of skirted under the radar, and this kid kind of befriends him a little bit, but finds out about his past. That book, I mean, that movie gets pretty gnarly. It's a really good, like, psychological kind of thing. Apt Pupil is really, really good. And the last one I got here is Pet Sematary. The first one, not the remake.
I was going to mention that one. Yeah.
Well, go ahead and mention it, bro. I know you probably like that movie because Dead.
What year was that made?
Was that like 88 or 89, maybe?
Yeah,
maybe
yeah. So that I considered was one of his first generation movies where there was just nothing it seemed like he could churn out, and then they'd adapt it into a screenplay that wouldn't work. And that was when he was at his height, and was Silver Bullet made a little bit after that?
Silver Bullet would have been before, I think.
Before?
I think Silver Bullet's from 1985.
Right.
And Pet Sematary. Well, if you can spell, Robbie. Pet Sematary, the original one is 1989. So right after.
Okay, so right after. All right. So at that point, if you said it was a Stephen King movie, I was there. So
that movie's creepy. Talking about creepy kids. When that kid comes back, the zombie kid, that's scary, bruh. I still messes with me. And then what's her name? Denise Crosby, like the zombie, bruh. I can't handle it.
I forgot she was in that.
I can't handle it, man. I can't handle it.
I forgot she was in that. Denise Crosby, that's right.
Sheldon says, Apt Pupil stuck with me for a while after the initial viewing. Dude, there's a scene where he like bakes a fucking cat in an oven. Like, because revisiting these days starts bringing this back up in his subconscious, right? And he starts like acting out on some of the stuff. And yes, Timothy Hutton was in The Dark Half, and he did a fantastic job on that one.
Fred Gwynne was in that. Fred Gwynne, obviously monsters. Oh yeah. I really love watching him. His latter half of his career, he finally broke out of that typecasting.
Well, he's in that.
My Cousin Vinny. Yeah. He was awesome.
Is it that line is like sometimes dead is better? Is that the line that he says in it? But
I think so.
When that little kid like cuts his Achilles, bruh, like that still gets me too, man. Every time I see that scene, man. But that's all I had on my list. I'll throw an honorable mention to Night Flyer, which is they wanted it to be released in theaters, but it wound up being an HBO like premiere or something back in the 90s. But the Night Flyer about a vampire coming into town, in an airplane, almost said motorcycle, an airplane or whatever. Like, I was really surprised how good that movie actually kind of was. Like, it was pretty gnarly. It was pretty fun. So that's a good one too.
So one thing I want to mention was I remember Stephen King reached such a height of popularity. Remember when he got into he got hit by a car or something?
Yes, he got hit by a van.
You remember that?
Almost died. Yeah, he wrote that into The Dark Tower, where basically he shows that Roland and Jake come and save him. So he can finish the story.
If I remember, he was just kind of walking on a road or something.
Yeah, he was just doing his normal walk, and he was walking up on this hill, and a van was coming up the hill, and the guy I think was drinking, and he was like veering off onto the side of the road and hit Stephen King, man, almost killed him. He's in the hospital for a while.
I remember reading about that, and it was almost like, his stories come to life in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I said, in The Dark Tower, he puts that in there, right? Like that he actually writes that he does die, right? But they have to go through other worlds back in time and save him so that he can actually finish the story. Because if he doesn't finish the story of The Dark Tower, all of reality, including our reality, will collapse. That's meta.
Yeah, you're right. So I remember reading about it and thinking, why is Stephen King walking around the woods? First off, it almost seemed like the start of one of his stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Guy walking alone on a country road near the woods, and then drunk driver comes out, bang, guy hits him. All right, and he's laying there in the grass. It's almost like the start of one of his books.
Yeah, it really is. I know. I think he liked going for walks just to kind of think. Or like
Sure.
if he hit like a block, he would go out for a walk. And I know that I think he still does go out for walks, but he doesn't go that route anymore. Apparently, he just stopped going that route.
Does it on Peloton.
He probably does nowadays, man. What a great conversation. What's some great movies? Those are some great movies, and we were talking a little bit before we started that there's this idea that Stephen King adaptations in film are not good because there's a bunch that aren't. Right? The Langoliers, Sleepwalkers. There's some duds out there, and I think there was a period of nothing but duds. But we forget The Shining, The Mist, Misery, Children of the Corn, Creepshow, It, Carrie, Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, Christine, The Dark Half, Apt Pupil, Pet Cemetery, Night Flyer, Running Man. There's some good ones. We haven't even talked about all of them, right?
Well, I think it's a numbers game. I think that and I don't know this for a fact, and I could be dead wrong, but excuse the pun. I think probably as an author, he probably has the most films that have been turned into movies, or the most books that have been turned into a screenplay into a movie. So with that number, it's just a numbers game. You're going to have some duds. You don't always get the same director. You don't always get the same vision. You never know what happens. Making a movie from beginning to end is a lot of different people involved, a lot of processes. But when you look at the totality of the man's work,
yes.
I mean, are you kidding me? So he's had a few duds, which may or may not have been within his control. Ultimately,
an incredibly prolific writer, right? The only other writer that I can personally think of that I follow, that I know of, where everything becomes a movie and in some kind of way significant is Michael Crichton. But Michael Crichton didn't write as many novels as Stephen King had.
I know what you're saying, but I gotta disagree with that. I think when you look at Stephen King and the number of books that turned into movies, now you add the whole what's that dude? What's his pen name again? His anonymous pen name again? Richard Bachman. I didn't even know that. Now you throw the Richard Bachman thing in there and Running Man and all those movies. Hands down. I mean, I can't think of anybody else
there's nobody. I don't think that has as many for sure.
So I'm not surprised that some of them turned out to be duds. I mean, every actor known to man, has had duds. Okay,
well, especially because we know this, how they do this. Like a studio gets some money, they get the ability to buy the option on a Stephen King thing. They're like, the name will sell it. We don't have to we spent so much money on buying the property. We don't need to put so much into the production. And that's, I think, what happened for a while there.
And sometimes it's just a different vision from the director and it doesn't work.
And sometimes it's a different vision from the director and it does work, like The Shining, which
exactly
one of the best and Stephen King's least favorite. All right, what a great conversation, man. Me and Rex, though, you can join us every week over at the EXP, The Experience, on Monday nights, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. We go for 2 hours. Great collectibles. We recently had Ken Hazer. We've had Mariana Nicieza. We've been having these artists come in and doing art, and seeing Ken do a Lobo and a Punisher just right before our eyes while we're all just bullshitting. Like that was
no reference point either. He didn't have a reference.
He didn't even pull up an image on his phone. He just knew it. He just knew what to do.
That's just amazing to watch. So we have a great time, great collectibles for sale. And then of course, Robbie and I, every Friday we're at noon Eastern time, we do our Rex and Robbie show. So what the topic is, who knows? We don't know.
We never know.
We'll know Friday morning.
That's usually when I figure it out.
You were late last week, man. I was looking for your email, like, man, that email hasn't come, man. I need a few minutes to research.
Well, that's because last week I told you on Monday that it was going to be ghost movies.
I don't remember.
I told you beforehand. You asked me, and I was like, it's going to be ghost movies, and you're like, oh, that's great. You and John were like, oh, that's going to be awesome, and then I guess you
should know me. You've known me now long enough to know that, dude. You got to put it in writing. Otherwise, I'm not going to remember anything, bro.
Put it in writing and send it right to his email. You also do the show with AR on Wednesday nights.
We do it on Wednesday night. Not this Friday. Today, Nick is actually at the Diamond Con down in Baltimore, so he will not be doing the original art show. But the original art show is usually Fridays, 7 p.m. Eastern time. All original art, and we'll start again next week. So this week, taking a little break for the con.
Nice. Well deserved, of course. But Horror Fest is about to be wrapping up this weekend. We got 3 days of Horror Fest starting tomorrow night. We're talking about Pumpkinhead on Dylan's Horror Show, who just recently hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'm so proud of my man Dylan. And then on Sunday night, we're doing Videodrome by David Cronenberg. And then Monday night, after the Experience show, an hour after that, join us for A Nightmare on Elm Street, the entire franchise reviewed. All 9 movies. Or maybe it's 10. Might be 10. Maybe it's 9. We're doing all the damn movies, and it's going to be fun. So you don't want to miss out the conclusion of Horror Fest. You don't want to miss out on the Experience show that we do on Monday nights. And you don't want to miss out on the Rex and Robbie show on Fridays. Rex, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We're dipping
Have a
out,
good weekend,
y'all.
everyone.